Lust is one of the most powerful enemies that a man must face throughout his life. From adolescence to old age, every man is a potential target of this putrid and aberrant demon. The constant desire to sexualize an interaction or simply be a regular consumer of erotic content may seem like minor inconveniences, the type of problems we promise to fix tomorrow, but which are never solved because we unconsciously give in. Just like Hansel and Gretel, we are seduced by the sweetness of lust to willingly enter its repulsive prison, and without realizing it, we become slaves to a depraved, dark, and extremely harmful force. Because lust is one of the moral corruptions that rots the soul the most. Its depraved end is the very destruction of man. In this video I present to you, it is a duty to conquer lust. Lust is the uncontrolled appetite to satisfy sexual desire. But look at how ironic it is. Man boasts of his strength and power, but he is easily tamed by moral perversions that poison his being. Many of the serious problems we face at a cultural level arise from the massive presence of lust in our decisions. At first, it may seem like it doesn't, but it's precisely because lust is so metaphorically ingrained in our blood that it goes unnoticed. It has become a sort of second nature. The most terrifying thing about this is that its consequences are devastating both individually and collectively, and we, naive by nature, don't realize the slightest bit of its presence. A husband's infidelity, resulting from lust, may seem like no major inconvenience, that it's simply a couple's issue to be solved legally, and its repercussions involve only the people involved. But the abyss created by that infidelity is disturbing. That seemingly harmless infidelity can result in divorce, which is itself a process that involves very difficult financial and emotional problems to face. Divorce, consequently, can result in emotional difficulties for a child's development. The separation of parents inevitably causes psychological disruptions in the child that require attention. These developmental difficulties, if not properly addressed, can culminate in identity disorders or emotional voids that, unfortunately, will not be resolved except through a painful process of introspection, reflection, acceptance, and forgiveness. These identity and emotional problems, when unresolved, are generally transferred to interpersonal relationships. The emotional progress of an individual with their partner is inevitably harmed, and those who suffer the consequences of that emotional void end up being both the individual themselves and the people around them, because they are no longer emotionally capable of being vulnerable with others. All because a father was dominated by the dark forces of lust and cowardly gave in to them. In Latin America, it's very common to find households where children were raised without a father because he committed infidelity and had to leave the house. Or perhaps he stayed at home, but the relationship between father and mother was completely affected. I dare say that we all know the story of an aunt or grandmother who had a husband who was unfaithful, and their home has been the target of countless problems. All because lust corrupts from the innocence of the heart to the love of marital commitment. Lust is similar to a type of demonic possession. The man's consciousness is relegated to second place, and his actions are dominated by the perversions of this moral corruption. A glance, a phrase, a movement, a thought, or an impulse are entirely controlled by lust. It is when the man has committed the lustful act that he snaps out of the trance, becomes conscious again, and realizes the gravity of his actions. Some have internalize lust so deeply within themselves that indeed it has become second nature, and they are unaware of their recklessness. Only when they face a serious legal problem or an unexpected and abrupt clash with reality do they accept their degeneration and opt for redemption. Others are so steeped in lust that their entire life becomes a dark prison where only perversion dwells, and their being becomes a true aberration. Rapists, sexual killers, and child pornography dealers are the quintessential examples of how far lust can possess a man, destroy him from the inside, and harm those around him. And it is precisely that lust is not an end in itself. It is a dark force that seeks to destroy man and his relationship with the world. No doctrine, philosophy, or religion exalts lust as a path to self-realization. Even hedonism, which is recognized as a philosophical movement advocating for the pursuit of pleasure, acknowledges that excess can cause more pain than satisfaction, and lust, if not controlled, is capable of enslaving the individual and corrupting them. Sexual desire is inherent to humanity. Biologically, we are wired to feel attraction to a woman and to act on that attraction. From a Darwinian perspective, our behavior is partially determined by the pursuit of the survival of our species through mechanisms of natural and sexual selection. It's natural to feel sexual desire for the opposite sex. We are not mechanical, insensible, and immune beings to the visual stimuli of our species. Our body responds chemically to the presence of an attractive woman, and our genes motivate us to find strategies for reproduction. In other words, we are continuously influenced by forces that are outside the realm of consciousness to seek the satisfaction of sexual desire. The issue is that we are not strictly animals whose behavior is governed by the desires of the moment. We have will, reason, and consciousness. We know that the excess of a desire becomes a corruption highly harmful to our spirit. Gluttony, greed, pride, envy, and lust are excesses that only harm our spirit. The body rejoices in the orgasm, but the being, knowing that not everything the world offers is beneficial, is aware that lust is evil, a defect, as the Stoics would call it. The excessive materialization of sexual desire is irrefutable evidence of the lack of self-control in a man's life, and a man who cannot control his impulses will not be in a position to exercise virtue properly. His life will be built on lies and self-deceptions because, unable to free himself from the claws of lust, he prefers to live a double life rather than face his degeneration and choose restoration. Paul of Tarsus suggests in his letter to the Corinthians that the only way to counteract the aberrations of lust is by fleeing. It is not fought like any other moral corruption, because man, in his imperfect flesh, is highly influenced by lust. In our Western world, it is almost impossible to find refuge from this demon. Movies, music, television, social media, shows, even literature are all closely linked to sex. It is necessary for man to take control of his decisions and distance himself from everything that poisons his spirit. Otherwise, we would be heading toward a world of perverse, degenerate, and corrupt absolutes. However, the story is not over. There is still time to return to the greatness that resides in us. I invite you to be a man of virtue, stronger than his temptations and greater than his demons. Therefore, always remember that true power does not lie in giving in to impulses, but in mastering them. A man's greatness is not measured by how many times he falls into temptation, but by how many times he rises and chooses virtue over desire. Lust seeks to subjugate, but you were not created to be a slave to your passions. You were designed for greatness, to transcend, to build a legacy that does not wither with time. A man who masters his will is a free man, a strong man, a man worthy of respect. The world will continue trying to seduce you with its fleeting pleasures, but only you decide which path to take. Do not walk in shadows when you can walk in the light. Cultivate discipline, strengthen your character, and become an example for those around you. Because ultimately, the true victor is not the one who never faces temptation, but the one who, even when facing it, chooses to resist.